Great stuff. This is probably one of our most anticipated webinars. So thank you to our panelists for securing the folks that have come on. And I'm also going to just quickly add a poll about how you'd rate your knowledge or expertise in OCPP. Got a few options here. Would love to get a sense of where people are and their knowledge or expertise on OCPP. This is great. We've got one person who doesn't know what OCPP was, which is fantastic. So I'll do an intro to that as well. But before I do that, I did want to introduce our panelists today. I'll start off with Pon. Pon is someone we're really glad to have with us today. He's previously led e-mobility product development at Vattenfall. Many of you in Europe will know it as a utility. It is also an incredibly large charge point operator in Europe. Pon now leads the research and development projects at Heliox, particularly for heavy-duty EV charging station development. And we're really fortunate to have him here because he's got the opportunity to see the scalability of OCPP from a CPO perspective, as well as from a charging station manufacturer perspective. And he's undoubtedly one of the leading experts in the EV charging world. So thank you, Pon, for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Hi all. Happy to be here.
And also joining us today is co-founder and CTO of eDRV, Rupul. Rupul has had over a decade in telecoms. He's co-founded eDRV to serve as the global API platform for building EV charging applications. He's helped us build our own OCPP software stack from scratch and now supports many global enterprises that have built applications on our platform and runs thousands of EV charging stations daily. So thank you, Rupul, for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for joining us. I'm just as excited as you all to speak with Pon. It's not often that we get the opportunity to have like both sides of the hardware and the software on one panel. So it's I'm looking forward to asking him questions myself.
Fantastic. And I just wanted to start off with a very brief intro to OCPP, which is now the Open Charge Point Protocol is now the de facto protocol in Europe for communications between EV chargers and charging station management systems. There's a possibility that our talk could go into any direction and every direction. And what we wanted to do today was have a little bit more of a focus on where we were going to take this conversation around scaling, the idea of putting thousands of chargers in your network and how to take those first steps. So if we could keep our questions directed to scaling OCPP, that would be fantastic. And you can drop in your questions. If there's something really relevant, I'll make sure to ask the panelists straight away, but we'll also have a moment towards the end of the webinar to answer any remaining questions. So maybe we can start off with first steps. I think that's a really good place to start with OCPP implementation and what the first steps ought to be for a network. Maybe I could throw this to Pon.
Sure. For first step, I would always say like start with the business requirements. This might sound like a very generic answer, but this is relevant for every new development, true for OCPP as well. Because OCPP is a basic communication between the charger and the CPO back office or CSMS. It is a basic communication. It doesn't specify too much about the business logic. So it doesn't say what exactly you can build over the OCPP data. That's why it's important to have a visibility or at least a vision on what exactly you want to do with the OCPP data. Say for example, the requirements, business or technical requirements of a private fleet operator could be a lot different from a public charge point operator. Speaking of public charge point operator, there are local regulations that decides what is the right hardware and what is the right software for your applications. Giving some examples, if you have to operate in Germany, you have to be iHearect compatible. The hardware as well as software part of the OCPP should be ready to accommodate the iHearect updates later. Same in the US. If you are speaking about California, CTOP regulation is built on top of OCPP data. UK have their own set of public charging regulations. So these are the things typically you don't see that coming when you start the business, especially since you asked from the network operator. You just start coding the OCPP as such, but later when you scale up, you realize that, okay, maybe this is not the right hardware, maybe this is not the right software. So my advice or experience, what I learned is don't start coding immediately. First try to understand the business requirement, what exactly you will be doing with the OCPP data, then get into the implementation. I think having this clarity is the first step of OCPP implementation, in my opinion. What do you think, Rupul? Do you agree, or you think like, okay, this is very generic, you should have started differently?
Yeah, I think don't start coding immediately is something that doesn't just apply to OCPP. I think we're a startup, and in general, there's a principle of lean startups, which is to try to really double down on your business requirement. What is the problem that you're looking to solve? Do an MVP, take that to market, and so on. I think that applies to EV charging as well, which I think people forget that EV charging is a business. So to be honest, I would have loved for this webinar to be titled "Building Businesses to Scale with OCPP," because OCPP is definitely one part of it. And the reason I go down that route is that I think there's a lot of misconceptions on the problems that OCPP solves, and maybe we can go through some of that today. But generally speaking, we must remember that OCPP is a communications protocol. It defines how hardware charge stations should speak to server side, like eDRV. So that means at the end of the day, it establishes a messaging highway, nothing more. And at its best, it is you can think of it as the infrastructure layer. Now, we're in that business, so we love getting into the code, we love getting the infrastructure, and so on. So eDRV, as you know, is an API that allows you to build EV charging applications at scale on OCPP across multiple vendors. But if we take a step back, we often do. We must remember that at the end of the day, your business, I'm talking about our customers now, these could be CPOs, these could be energy management companies, fleet operators, etc., are in the business of doing some sort of a differentiation, right? So they need to do something innovative, something interesting to really appeal to their customers. And unfortunately, drivers and cars don't really care about your OCPP implementation. You could have the most efficient messaging backend messaging protocol, greatest implementation of OCPP ever, but what drivers care about is to be able to walk up to a location, charge, drive away. Fleet drivers care about leaving for their routes on time, fully charged, and so on. So we always, whenever we sit down with our customers, we always start with this conversation, like what is the business differentiation you're looking to build? eDRV is a great option for not having to go do that OCPP code. However, let's really think about by focusing in on your application stack, what is the differentiation you can bring, and then there's options there. So that's where I usually start. I think on your point on the temptation of going into code, I would also caution teams to think around the fact that this is fairly new as an industry. EV charging as an industry is new. There's a lot of misconceptions around what EVs are, which is why we also do eDRV Academy, which, kid you not, teaches our customers what AC charging is, what DC charging is, In AC charging, you have analog communication. In DC charging, you have the expansion of digital. What does that mean, and so on. So if people are coming so new to this, which also means that if you are looking to implement your own stack from scratch, the market is not filled with experts to pick up and start building this from scratch. So that's one of the first things that you will come across. And then the second part of this is infrastructure. This is WebSocket servers. This is messaging queues. So you really need to think carefully about why is infrastructure so important to your business case. And if it is, that's great. But for most businesses that are looking to scale whatever that is around EV charging, the messaging stack is super important. It is like a utility. You need to rely on it, but it's not the key differentiator of Corsair.
Yeah, it's super important as well, but it's interesting to get a sense of what sort of timescale we're looking at, Rupul, for these first steps of implementation. Could you give us a sense of how long it takes to get started with OCPP?
Interesting question. How long does it take to get started with OCPP? So if you're just looking to do an MVP, then there are options available for you to get started with one charge station and kind of off you go. But I again go back to Pon's point on the how long will depend on your business requirement. If you're just doing a university project to prove that you can take messages from a charger and show them on a dashboard, then a shorter amount of time. But the title of this is scaling OCPP. If you're heading towards scale, then you really need to think about lining up a lot of different elements to think about the time. Maybe Pon, I'll bounce this back to you.
Yeah, that's a good point, Rupul. That's also a reason why I said business requirement as first point, right? Because OCPP has 7 profiles like core profile, firmware management, multiple things. Typically, when you say I want to implement OCPP, most of the players just implement the core profile, but that has very limited functionality. Even there, for the people who have already seen the OCPP implementation, it's a very loosely written protocol. Right, so it says like section 15.1.6, and there are 5 notes below that, and not everybody implements each and every line mentioned in the document, and there is big room for different interpretations as well. So in that front, only if you know, okay, I'm going to deploy this in a fleet, private fleet or a public fleet, then you know, okay, these are the parameters crucial for me. Let me focus on that and implement that. Otherwise, you just implement a core profile, go into the field, and then come up with a big surprise later. So the duration to ramp up is also depending on what you want to implement and to what detail you want to implement. Even if you are a OCA certified charge station manufacturer or a charge station management software provider, there is still some room for different interpretation. That is the reason why we still have plug first events arranged by OCA. So it's important to have a clear vision what exactly I want to achieve out of this implementation, and then make a planning accordingly. That decides your duration. It can be like within 3 months you have a first MVP, or it takes 9 months to implement the first MVP.
Pon, if I may jump in, so when we talk, when the question is asked, how long does it take to implement OCPP, or how do we do it, etc. Is the general point of view that is taken is an eDRV-like point of view. There's the server side. We're also seeing teams that are trying to implement OCPP for the first time now on the hardware side, based on the fact you have seen that world. Would love little thought on what does that side of approaching a new hardware implementation of OCPP look like?
Yes, again, hardware point of view, we try to comply all the specifications written down, because we want to address as big as market as possible, right? So we always try to implement everything, but with a strong emphasis, right? If if we are speaking about Heliox, the fleet charging is #1 priority. So if there are 5 nodes under one particular section, we definitely ask what is relevant for DC charging, what is relevant for fleet customer. Then we try to emphasize and improvise a bit in those sections, right? So if there are 5 nodes under one authorization profile or something, just to give an example, for a AC wall box, point node number 1, 2, and 3 might be very much relevant. But for a DC manufacturer, point number 1, 3, and 5 could be more relevant. So this is why when we design or when we try to implement on a new product, be it on the hardware side, also speaking from my previous experience on the CSMS side, we always think about our vision and then prioritize things accordingly.
I wanted to get a sense as well beyond the first steps, because that's kind of the ambit of our conversation and the idea of getting thousands on there. And Pon and Rupul, you both have this experience of seeing businesses scale. What are the main challenges that you might see as you're getting towards those thousands of charges? Maybe I could start with you, Rupul, on that.
Yeah, definitely. So we've gone through this ourselves, and I think some of the learnings here are quite generic. Would love to share them. I think an OCPP implementation in its early stages will look like it's a little bit like picking up any skill like golf, right? So initially it's like, well, how difficult can this be? Then you try to compete, and as you pick up any skill, you really need to work harder and harder. So as an example, over time, and I think Pon can comment on this as well from your experience, over time, you'll find that your first implementation, the servers, the infrastructure that you've set up, is no longer enough. You need to start doing something called horizontal scaling. I can expand on that. Essentially, adding additional servers. So as soon as that kind of paradigm of multiple devices, one machine starts breaking down, your engineering team is going to start looking at microservices and the ilk. And that in itself will start introducing a level of complexity that wasn't there before. This is not something that other web services don't come across. It's just something that you have to take care of now. The second part that that is kind of unique to OCPP, at least 1.6, is that it is quite strict with the order in which messages should arrive to your application. And again, in initial days, you may get away with this because traffic's low, there's no latency in your processing and so on. You've got probably one server that's processing stuff serially. But then over time, your downstream applications require order. Messages should arrive in the right order. And delivering that, maintaining that, monitoring that at scale, having alarms in place in case something goes out of whack can be challenging, and is kind of unique to our industry and OCPP. Finally, the fun part is all of this is an infrastructure. As you're adding servers, your team's excited, like, wow, look at us, more servers. We're using all these services on the cloud provider side. Your cost is going up and up and up. And you're essentially doing the same thing. You're processing messages from left to right in a highly reliant way. And this is something that starts kind of adding up. And then finally, one of the things that every team needs to think about is, as you're scaling from a software perspective, security and compliance becomes important very quickly. Again, depending on the kind of environment you're in, this could happen right from the start or pretty soon. And by security and compliance, I mean you really need to think about the security of your infrastructure, and if you are an end-to-end operator, even the charge stations. But I won't spend too much time on this because this should be a webinar on itself. And then on the compliance side, I think maybe I'll turn it over to Pon a little bit. But yeah, I think these are some of the things that you need to think about. Definitely, you'll need SOC 2, ISO 27K certification, because otherwise you are not at par with anything in the market. And yeah, and this is something that you need to start thinking of fairly quickly. It comes up on you very fast.
Yeah, Pon, did you want to add to that in terms of what are the main challenges to thousands of chargers in the field?
No, not really to add. In fact, Rupul has summarized it very well. But what I could try is to explain it more from a business side. Something what I have seen in my previous job. At least I was a bit fortunate to see the scale up. When I joined, we were around 3,000 charge point, and then at one point of time it was 40,000 charge point. So the scale up phase is exciting. Growing up is really nice. Everybody loves that period of life, but it comes with a lot of growing pains. Growing pains, I mean the challenges what Rupul was saying. As I said, like he pretty much covered everything. I'll try to give some examples of what he did, what he meant, right? First, the huge load Rupul was saying, it is unavoidable, right? When you are operating 1,000, 2,000 chargers, a local server was sufficient. We had a server running perfectly fine, 100% uptime in Berlin, working perfectly fine. But when we were approaching 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 charge point, that server was not enough anymore, and it was no big decision. Within 2 years we were expecting a growth of 3,000 or 30,000 charge points. So we know that we need to move to cloud. It's an easy decision to make, but the implementation was super hard. Moving from a local server to the cloud itself was a big project, because the old hardwares which were built around 2015 2014 didn't support the automatic switching of OCPP endpoint URL. So we asked many of the hardware vendors to create a new firmware that can support switching. They tried, but still, you believe it or not, my colleagues drove to roughly 400 locations, go physically, plug in the LAN cable, and then change the endpoint. These are something, many of the initial stage, you don't even realize it, but every large CPO who started their operation like 5-6 years ago might have witnessed this. This is one example. Then while scaling up, tracking every important parameter is super crucial. If you don't track, if you don't monitor anomalies, it can cost you big time. Again, another example, we didn't realize that we had to monitor the data cost on the cloud, and we have to monitor the number of messages on the SIM card, because typically charge stations don't consume so much SIM or GSM data. It's all in kilobyte. Nobody cared about it until I got an invoice from a telecom operator for 21,000 euros in a month, which is like, then what? 21,000 euros. What happened was one buggy firmware, which we missed to validate completely, which went into the field, which affected roughly around 300 charge points, and they started sending a lot of garbage data into the back office, right? It not only gave us a big GSM invoice, but also big invoice on the cloud side with Microsoft. So these are the things you learn it when you scale up by doing mistakes. It's a matter of just tracking a parameter, and when that limit exceeds, you just put a breakdown point. That's all I had to do, but we didn't realize it. These are silly mistakes. You encounter it as part of the scalability. Another example, if I have to give, from product management perspective, right? We always, not only us, every company wants to have a slim product portfolio so that we can improvise our efficiency. But when you are operating at a different geographies, having a simple portfolio is not practical at all. If the infrastructure, the meter cabinet in Netherlands is completely different from a meter cabinet in Germany. And in the US, it's a different infrastructure. So we end up working with a different charging station, different kind of installations, and a different kind of software solutions. In the end, maintaining a product portfolio, one end you want to keep it slim, but on the other hand, you have to constantly make it wider and wider, which is a big challenge, completely unavoidable challenge during during the scale-up phase. And then the security is super important. When you are a big company handling just 100 customers, you don't even realize that there is a profile called a security profile, different levels of security within OCPP. Nobody cares about it during the initial stages. But when you are handling thousands of charge point, not only OCPP level security, but also your database management security, implement ISO 27000, lot of certification, how you handle customer data, GDPR implementation, everything comes in. Yeah, I know I'm just repeating what Rupul said, but these are common across anything. Yeah, whether I speak it from a charge station manufacturer point of view or from a charge point operator point of view, I see these kind of issues in both the worlds. When you handle a number of thousands of chargers, these things are unavoidable.
But I'm just keeping my eye on a couple of the questions. There's a raging chat going on here around real world examples and the physical challenges of like scaling to these EV chargers and in the field. Would you be able to speak to those kinds of challenges as well? Maybe using a couple of examples from your experience.
To me, yes, of course, right. As I was saying, like when you are small, there is 2 station installation in a day. Everyone is happy. Everything you can do it manually, right? But when you are handling thousands of chargers, maybe 100 installations in one day, wall boxes I'm speaking. If it is a DC charger, even 10 chargers installation at one day is a huge load for an operations team, right? So working on bulk devices management, working on bulk configuration management, and working on bulk firmware management. These are the things you have to see it from the physical side. If you don't handle it with a good IT infrastructure, you end up doing a lot of manual work here. Firmware, again, as I say, at one point of time, we were around 40,000 charge point in my previous company. No way you can handle with just 2 or 3 different charging stations, right? You are automatically around 10 different charging station manufacturers, which means at least 15, 20 different firmware versions you have to handle. So the product development teams cannot just develop new products anymore. They have to constantly look at different firmware versions, constantly validate them, then roll it out, pilot it in between. So these are the things just add. These are not really a physical challenges as such. Glad that OCPP have a lot of provisions for handling it or automated it. But on the other hand, if you don't handle it well, if you don't have a proper infrastructure view of or DevOps point of handling, then you easily miss out, which end up in a lot of manual work. What do you think, Rupul?
I can only feel your pain because we're on the other side. Yeah, I think in addition to some of the points that you made about monitoring at scale, firmware is a big one. I think that should be a whole 1 hour in itself. How to do it right, how to test, how to do grayscale deployments, how to do rollbacks at scale. It's challenging. It's one of the areas that we're looking to innovate in. But I also wanted to I wanted to maybe add one other wrinkle, if you will, where I think there's a kind of silent participant in our industry that plays a very key role that isn't talked about enough, which is the role of the telecoms or internet provider, right? I think in the early stages, we've had customers who will go and install a cable themselves, or their first couple of sites will be in like prime locations where they have near line of sight to the cell towers and so on. But then, Pon, as you said, as let's take the example of Wallbox's AC charge installation. If your teams are doing like 20 to 30 of these at a time on their routes, one of the things gets forgotten about is what's the cell signal like in these places that the teams are happily going and doing installations in. For some of our customers, we've had to teach them how to do wireless site surveys. Just because I'm from that industry, that was the first half of my career. We built a little tool to help them out there. This is not often thought about. And also, what takes even if it's a DC charging installation, what can take some teams by surprise is the security and networking aspect. Even if you're doing a wired install, you have to take that into account. You need to have teams that have that skill and are able to execute the telecoms part of EV charging also within the project, and I think that's often missed. And I think that needs to be highlighted, and it does end up affecting uptime and reliability and so on.
Yeah, and I wonder if this also connects with Douglas's question. He draws this analogy between how there's a bunch of ATMs out there in the world, and they don't really have network problems per se. Why is scalability an issue with OCPP? Anyone want to take that?
Yeah, I like that question, Douglas. So it's a very good question. A lot of technologies we take inspiration from banking industry. If you look at the ISO 15118 encryption, or a lot of securities, what we are speaking coming from banking industry, and a lot of inspiration from telecom industry as well. But we are nowhere closer to the reliability of these two industries. Why? Because it's not matured yet. The interoperability issues are still the case. A lot of interoperability issues between different providers. EV charging is not a straightforward thing, right? There are multiple stakeholders involved. There is a vehicle, there is a charger, there is a grid company, and there is a charge point operator, charge point operating system, Google or Amazon or Microsoft cloud service provider, GSM telecom service provider. It's a complex ecosystem. There are multiple stakeholders here, and uh, all of them are seeing this as a new industry, right? So the intercommunication between them are not super standardized like in the telecom industry or in the banking industry. That's why there are interoperability issues. Also, the protocols between the stakeholders are still getting matured. Again, we keep using the word protocol. The protocol means it's a guideline, right? Um, I can interpret as I want. If I don't follow the same way Rupul follows, no one is going to question. That's a big difference between a standard and a protocol. If it is a standard, things are well written. You say like, this is the margin. Say for example, giving an example of a charger, only 50 millivolts is acceptable on top side and 50 millivolts at the bottom side, and only 10 microseconds I can go this side or this side. The thresholds and the limits, everything is well defined when it comes to a standard, when it comes to an international standard. Whereas the whole EV charging ecosystem is handling a lot of protocol, open protocols, where things are not very well written, or giving some room for different interpretation. So thanks to the plug first events, now at least I see a lot of standardization on the OCPP side between the charger and the CSMS side. But still, what I see is like 9 out of 10 vehicles charge perfectly fine with the same charger and same hardware. But there is one special snowflake vehicle just don't charge, right? And no vehicle owner is ready to accept that the problem is with the vehicle. Uh, in a way, they are correct as well. They will think like, no, this is working perfectly fine, the problem with your charger. But when you deep dive into it, uh, they are interconnected. Say, for example, if you might wonder, we are speaking about OCPP. OCPP is all about CSMS and charger. How does it affect the vehicle? The vehicle and charger speaks IEC 61851 and ISO 15118. That's where when they work interconnected, things go wrong. Say, for example, when the vehicle just follows IEC 61851, where they say like you can reduce current, but you cannot go below 8 ampere or 6 ampere. There are some limits. Whereas in OCPP smart charging profile, you can go up to 0 ampere. So in some practical cases, right? So from the CPO back office who wants to balance or optimize their energy goes to zero current for some reason. But this vehicle doesn't know that it's a smart charging profile involved here. They just go into sleep mode and don't wake up at all. So after 4 hours, when the driver, he or she comes back and then see that vehicle is not charged, and they just blame the charge station manufacturer, or in some cases the charge point operator. But who is here to blame is the vehicle. So they don't know when they designed the vehicle, when they designed the particular firmware, they didn't know that smart charging profile, which has nothing to do with the vehicle, nothing to do with the 61851, can create an impact here. So these are typical interoperability issues, which we can fix only when we test with multiple vehicles and multiple software, hardware systems. It is getting better and better. At least this is something I could visualize, right? 2 years ago, a lot of issues. Now a lot of improvements are happening. At Heliox, we constantly do interoperability tests with different vehicles, different charge station, CSMS solutions, so that we know that it works with everybody. So interoperability testing is still a mandatory step. We are not there up to the standards of telecom or banking yet. That's my humble opinion, Douglas.
So I can add a kind of a server-side software point of view here to the example Pon's given. So so you've got this chain of actors, right? You've got the vehicle, you've got hardware from different vendors, you've got the software, the server-side software, you've got the utility, you've got the cloud provider, you've got all of these different actors. What I think is still missing in our industry is the transparent flow of information to all of these different actors, because they have a responsibility to deliver service to the driver or the vehicle, the fleet vehicle. So in the example Pon gave, where there is an energy management signal going down to the charge station to please drop current, I'll make it up to 1 amp, and the vehicle hangs, there isn't a flow back of information all the way to the intelligent entity that decided to make this decision. All you get from, it's a little bit like you only get information from the next person in the chain. You don't get information all the way down the chain and back and around. And I think that would really help, again, application designers that aren't doing malicious. They're just trying to cut down power as much as they can, but they don't know why the vehicle keeps hanging. 80% of the vehicles will respect it. It's just that the last few did not. Well, which ones? What firmware version would this vehicle communications board have that we should watch out for, and so on. So this kind of open transparency is still something we as an industry are working towards. We'll get there. Telecoms was I guess invented by Alexander Graham Bell a long time ago. Hopefully we'll get there faster. I just want to share something positive there as well. I don't want to be all negative about where we are as an industry. We've seen some very first steps around the standardization of this. So for example, there's a consortia in the US that has recently pushed, they call the ChargeX consortia. They're pushing for a standardization of error codes, which I think is a fantastic first step in our industry, where we see this in the web, where you have standardized HTTP error codes. Every developer knows what they are. They're well defined, and you can build and program on that basis. We're heading there a little bit ourselves now.
Yeah, I think it's a very good initiative. I like it as well. Again, from a charge station manufacturer as well as from a CPO point of view, right? Nowadays, in the charging stations, a lot of error codes are custom implemented. Every charge station manufacturer have their own set of document. If you say, for example, Heliox chargers, we have error code implementations, but you need a document from us to understand how we share certain information. Likewise, you work with any hardware in the field, there is a different definition. There is no common definition of, okay, these are the parameters you have to monitor. These are the definition for that particular term. That is something still missing. So I think that's one area the whole industry has to look about, having a common definition of what exactly we mean by uptime, what exactly we mean by reliability of charging infrastructure, and then measure it. So if we don't measure, we don't improve, right? You cannot measure what you don't measure. So you have to measure and monitor, and then bring a transparency, as you were saying, Rupal. Make it clear for all the stakeholders. Then each of the parties can try their best to improve on that particular area. If I have to give some example of what we are doing at Heliox, say for example, making sure that charger works perfectly or to the best it can is number one priority, especially companies like Heliox who work with public infrastructure, public transport. But we cannot mess up with buses and a lot of garbage pickup trucks running with Heliox chargers. So ensuring good reliability is number one priority. Assume that that's something taken care. We have challenges, but assume that that's something taken care. There are many other things around us that can make the chargers look bad. The CSMS can go wrong, the telecom connection can go wrong, multiple stakeholders can go wrong, right? In the end, the customer only sees that the charger doesn't work. So we tried few steps, say for example, making use of the local whitelist functionality in OCPP, which allows you to start the charging in a fleet. Say for example, we know which vehicle always plugs in. It's not a strange vehicle newly coming in. We know or the drivers, if we know this is the driver constantly using this particular charger, we whitelist those authorization tokens inside the charger, so that even if the CSMS is down, even if the telecom connection in between is down, we can still allow the charger to operate. Customer is happy in the end. Second reason is also, we don't do it yet, but things like supporting dual endpoint URL. So if the main CSMS breaks down, automatically falls back to the next server, so that there is no interruption of operation as such. Things like supporting dual SIM card. These are the things we try from our influence as a charge station manufacturer, what we could do, which are beyond our control, but we try our best. Purely speaking, what is in my control is build a good charger, that's all. But that's definitely not sufficient, because charging is a complex ecosystem. Everything has to work. So we also try to go beyond our influence, like the cases where what I said, and we try to make sure that the charging happens.
Pon, to give you a CSMS point of view on that one, I think it goes back to the point that you made right at the top, which is what is this for, right? So what is the business use case? I think what we see from our side, so eDRV serves and supports everything from like a 3.6 kilowatt AC charge station all the way to bus charging, right? So you can imagine the amount of features, the amount of backups, all the reliability that you described, maybe more available at kind of the more expensive, high power end of the scale, rather than something you've picked up from Amazon. And this is one of our challenges, because we work across all of these different segments, of course. But at the same time, you can also kind of see why there are chargers that are OCPP compatible, and I'm doing air quotes here. However, have very varied implementations of the OCPP feature set, because the OCPP feature set is fairly vast, and depending on the primary business use case, you may find that there are certain feature sets within OCPP that are more emphasized than other ones, given all these different constraints on the charger side. However, if you're going to build an application that works with AC and DC, works with chargers that are at home or at workplace, and also on the highway, slightly higher power, then you have to embrace where we are as an industry and the interoperability challenges that come with it, and not shirk away from it, which means that your business application won't be successful. I think we, at least from our perspective, constantly see charging vendors trying to improve reliability But sometimes you also have to accept that it's not possible. On a 3.6 kilowatt sub $400 charger that you've picked up from Amazon, you're not going to get dual web sockets. You're not going to get the TLS encryption sometimes, and so on. Because, well, guess what? That stuff is expensive.
Sorry, Rupul, we're just coming close to time, but I just wanted to make sure that we're getting as many things covered as possible. So I wanted to make a quick announcement because I'm seeing a lot of questions around security, around the viability of 1.6, what's going to be happening with 1.6. And I also wanted to make an announcement because we've just released a guide recently on OCPP 201. And the idea is maybe to cover a lot of these issues that maybe we couldn't cover in the webinar, but I have taken note of a lot of these questions and the idea that maybe we could do this for a future webinar, particularly on OCPP 201. Oscar has already jumped the gun and given a link. This will be a first look for everyone here in the chat. I'm sending it now in the chat as well. And this covers, everything from scaling, security, how to be transparent using OCPP 201, sustainability, and interoperability. A lot of things that we weren't able to get into this. But I wondered maybe to maybe answer a question from our chat, and this was directed at Pon as well from Ramya. He said, when you start engaging with a new charger OEM, there tend to be interoperability issues between the CMS and the charger. What's your advice for an expanding CPO network? And in terms of scalability, is it better to tweak your CMS to adapt to the change or to request that the new OEMs for a firmware update? I know we talked about firmware updates previously.
It's difficult one to answer, right? It depends on how big you are. I know it's a political answer, but that's the state it is, right? When I was at Vattenfall, I had the liberty to dictate something on the charge station manufacturer. I can say, this is my interpretation of OCPP. You go and release me a new firmware. I had that power because we were more than 40,000 charge point. If I were a startup, I would end up tweaking my CSMS so that I can adapt as many charging stations. So it's this is a typical state where we are in. It's in the grow up phase. Depending on the size, you can tweak, but I definitely see these issues as a temporary issues, right? A lot of new developments are happening. OCPP 2.0.1 is already bringing a lot more clarity. I don't know how long it's going to be 2.0.1. Why not 2.1, 2.2? There can be multiple updates and some efforts or some dedicated task force working on new standardizations as well. IEC 63110. These are good initiatives. I honestly don't know when they materialize it, but the evaluation is in the right path, trying to standardize things so that we don't have to have these power games between players. Be practical during the current scenario that fits. That would be my advice.
And Rupul, interoperability has
really
its own very
answer,
special definition, isn't it, Rupul? Under OCPP,
I think,
interoperability.
I think in the realm of OCPP, generally when we speak about interoperability, we're talking about generally hardware that needs to be interoperable using OCPP so that your application stack that runs on top can deliver a consistent UX. There is, of course, interoperability in the realm of the vehicle to the charging station, interoperability. Someone asked about European roaming. That's also interoperability. You are interoperating across, that's a word, across different CPOs. But OCPP interoperability is I think, the question we are looking at here, where it's all these varied implementations of the same document. So OCPP is a document. It's not a standard. It's not a piece of software. It's a PDF that engineering teams on the hardware side, engineering teams on the software side look at and interpret slightly differently at the edges. So I think the way to accept that and take that forward in terms of scaling your business for for EV charging is to is a little bit like what we do at eDRV. We recognize that for various reasons, charging vendors will implement or not implement certain parts of OCPP. We accept that. That's fine. We make sure that our APIs are aware of that, so you don't blindly send charging profiles to a charger that doesn't support it, and so on. And we also try to not just do OCPP testing, we try to do business use case testing. So for a public charging, it may be something quite simple. For DC charging, where you're trying to do smart charging at a depot, it's a very different kind of testing that we automate and make sure that your use case using our APIs will run.
Pon, I'd love to give you the last word as well on interoperability testing.
Yeah, I see that question as well. Yeah, multi-vendor network, right? I have to answer from a charge point operator perspective here. As I said, when you are a big, large charge point operator with 20,000, 30,000 charge point, you might be handling multiple hardwares already. With multiple hardwares, we spoke about multiple firmwares, but also building certain solutions like building a load balancing solutions can be challenging, right? Because it's not smart charging profile is part of OCPP, but how you do the load balancing between the devices is something still proprietary. A lot of energy management handles with Modbus interfaces, but again, different variants of Modbus. Some of them are Modbus TCP/IP, some of them are Modbus 485, some of them are EE bus. So again, a lot of protocols in between. It's not standardized. So this is one area where things are difficult or can get difficult when you handle multiple hardware. Forget about multiple hardware manufacturer. Even if you have a same hardware manufacturer, different generation of devices might be acting differently. At least I started with OCPP 1.5 SOAP, then 1.5 JSON SOAP, and 2.0, and now we are at 2.0.1. Not everything is backward compatible, right? So if you are building a completely new feature, today I want to build plug and charge with ISO 15118. No way I can run it on a older device running OCPP 1.5, right? So this is a continuous evolution, keeping up the interoperability across all the devices, across all the CSMS, across all the vehicles is not practical. So at one point of time, you have to consider certain products as legacy, keep them out of the equation, but that's hard. It's a big investment. No way I can just replace 2000 stations in the field, update them with a completely new hardware. So this is a bit difficult, but again, we are on the right path. That's how I see every new update on the standardization or on the protocol or on the hardware architecture, things are going in the right direction. So I think we will soon have a good solution for multi-vendor networks as well. For now, this is a bit of a pain point for every large charge point operator.
Exactly, and no, I think that's a fantastic place to stop. I know we've had a flood of questions, and we have a record of all of those, so we'll get a chance to answer it. I also wanted to add my email address here for folks who do want to reach out to me directly with questions for our panelists. I'll put that in the chat right now. And feel free to send through anything that's OCP related. Happy to pass it on to one of the panelists as well. But apologies that we couldn't get to everyone. But I just want to finish off by thanking once again our panelists, Pon and Rupul. Fantastic webinar. We could probably fill 2 other webinars on scalability. So let's see what we can do next. But from us, thank you very much for joining, and see you next